And welcome to the JAMEEL RAWLS show. And today we're going to go over foreign customs and foreign language. And first and foremost, any of the countries I pick or any of the cultures I talk about, I just want to say I have no prejudice or inherent dislike for the nation or country currently, historically, or whatever my future perception of it may be. People are people everywhere. That being said, Russia is one of my favorite countries to research. Again, my grandfather, he retired from the United States Air Force as a colonel. Then he flew for Trans World Airlines for many years. He's a captain for TWA. And this, he's coming out of the Cold War era of his perception of Russia. Me and him used to sit and talk for hours and hours and hours. And I used to ask him questions. I used to basically ask him simple questions like, what is communism? And he would say, well, when a leader in a communist country, which does not have to particularly be Russia or the Soviet Union, a communist country could be Cuba, But he said in a communist country, when the leader gives a speech, you have to clap, whether you want to or not, for like 30 minutes. And if the little henchmen see you stop clapping, they may pull you out, beat the heck out of you, put you in jail, or kill you. And he said, that's communism. I said, wow, and then I started getting really interested in communism around that time. And I learned very quickly, most recently too, in the last few years, some of my historical subjects have been communist related. And I learned that, after World War II, by the late 40s and 50s, you didn't have any non-aligned countries anymore. A country was either aligned with capitalism or communism. That's it. If a country said they weren't aligned by the, at least definitely by the 60s, by the 70s, if they said they weren't aligned, they were aligned. So you had communist or capitalist. So a communist country does not have to be Russian, and a capitalist country does not have to be American. Okay. So now moving forward, a lot of the information I got and my perception of the Russian people turned out to be false. At some point at a future point in my life, I would end up meeting different Russian people, and I realized that the information that had been instilled in me, a lot of it was promoted as fear-based. And then when I met people from Russia, they seemed very likable, very kind. I didn't even feel any opposition or anything like that, and it just seemed, natural to talk to them. And so, now moving forward. So anyhow, I study a lot of different subjects. One of my greatest subjects studying was foreign intelligence, and I learned a lot of cool things about studying Russia. Number one, if you go visit Russia, at least especially before the Iron Curtain fell, even now, people still go by this doctrine. If you're a businessman, or you work in the government, for the United States government, or any other government, when you go to Russia, you're very careful of whose hand you shake. Now, I'm going to get into some common sociological customs, but handshaking. We're going to get into handshaking. Number one, when you go to Russia and you work in a business, a corporation, or for a government office, you're very careful over whose hand you shake. Because somebody may take a photograph of you shaking somebody's hand, and then they'll use it against you. There's been a lot of people who were in the service, or they were journalists or whatever. They went to the Far East, they went to Russia or whatever. They shook somebody's hand. A journalist or somebody took a photograph of it and said, "We got a photograph of you shaking a KGB agent's hand. What does your boss think about that? What does your congressman think about that?" A lot of people got framed with that tactic. A lot of people got blackmailed and exploited with that tactic. Now again, shaking hands. Women don't shake hands in Russia. So if you're a man and you like Russian women, you're like, man, these women are so beautiful. I can't wait to meet some girls in Russia. Women in Russia don't shake hands. A woman in Russia is not going to shake. It's not supposed to. If you invite a woman to shake your hand, you're looked at as being disrespectful, ignorant, uneducated. Even if the Russian woman's over here, that's not a custom that they go by. So especially if you go to Russia, you don't shake their hand. Okay, that being said, now move a little bit forward. One of the things that I've noticed about Russian people is they do not like to leave a conversation just be. In America, we talk to people and we just leave. We just pull away. Sometimes we don't even say anything. We'll be sitting outside talking to somebody. You just walk away, get in your car, and drive off. In Russia, they call that leaving the American way. If I'm in Russia and I start a conversation with somebody, it doesn't matter if I go to the bathroom. It doesn't matter if I go to the store to buy a pack of cigarettes. It doesn't matter where I go. I'm supposed to come back and let that person know our conversation's ended. Our communication's over with. It was nice meeting you. Thank you very much. I've had a great time here. I'll see you again, or call me, whatever. But you always come back to the individual and let them know. It leaves a proper impression. That's one thing Russians have a lot of mistrust in Americans about. They always say that. You never know when they're coming or going. So don't leave the American way. You leave the Russian way. You let them know. Okay. Now, getting into and most people don't know, communism, one of the things, okay, a lot of people, when it comes to the subject of Russia, people speak about communism. Russia and communism are not necessarily synonymous, meaning the Soviet Union was just the model that communism was tested out on. There was a lot of other countries like China, Korea, whatever. But in Russia, I believe that the reason why world communism became so unattractive is because the Soviet model appeared to have fallen. And these aren't my own words. This is from a book Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote, who's definitely an authority on communism. I think it's called The Grand Failure. Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book called The Grand Failure, and in his book, The Grand Failure, he definitely outlined how the Soviet model became unattractive to the rest of the world, and so that's the reason why the Soviet Union, the fall, the collapse of the Iron Curtain happened, because it became unattractive. It's a pretty good book. He has some good arguments. Maybe some people disagree. And then we'll look at Chinese. We'll move on, and we'll look at the Chinese. Let me look at China and see what I can. One of the things about China is there's two distinct languages. You have Cantonese, which is from Hong Kong. The island. Let me pull out a map real quick. Right, you have your island, Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong, Cantonese is prevalent, and then the rest of the country is Mandarin. So for most of the people who speak Chinese, they speak Mandarin. A small part speaks Cantonese, but Cantonese was very popular in the 1960s. Bruce Lee spoke Cantonese, and so Cantonese was very popular in the 1960s. When Hollywood came out with an assortment of martial arts films from the legendary Bruce Lee. And Chinese speak actually 3 languages in one. In China, well, first of all, we're talking about customs. I've heard this said that in China, one of the customs of bowing actually comes from the spread of disease. Instead of shaking hands, they would bow because of the spread of disease. So if you shake somebody's hand, you can get sick. If you just bow, you don't have to worry about getting sick. That's one of the customs. That's some intelligence I've gathered on why they bow instead of shake hands. But the Chinese actually speak 3 languages. and in Cantonese, Nin Hao is how you say hello in Mandarin, but there's three different tones. You have like that, uh, uh, and Chinese use tones. Okay. Then, of course, speaking of communism, you have Mao in his little red book, which is and don't get me started on the Vietnam. Don't get me started on the Vietnam War. I'll be here all night. I don't even like talking about the Vietnam War around people who've been in the Vietnam War, which some of them might agree with me. A lot of them have agreed with me on my perceptions of it. But the Vietnam War, and I don't. One of the things about the Chinese that always mystified me and puzzled me is, first of all, the Chinese use an assortment of about 3,000 characters in their traditional writing of the Chinese. They used about 3,000 characters. And the characters that they use, like the writing that they use traditionally, went from top to bottom, up and down. Now when they write, the West prefers it if they write side to side. But the Chinese used to write up and down. And I always thought when I came across people who were Chinese growing up, and I used to speak to my grandfather about this. My grandfather spoke a little bit of Chinese. He spoke a little bit of a lot of different languages, but he told me that the Chinese, me and him talked about this. I was like, how could they ever use a typewriter? If you use 3,000 characters in a language to write, how can you use a typewriter? That's one of the things. And then the Japanese use like 200 characters. Okay. And we'll look at one more country. Let me pick a map. I think Korea as a nation is interesting. You have North Korea and South Korea. And I'm going to come back with some more information on customs in Korea because I don't want to embarrass myself and undermine the current status quo. You see, the Korean people both come from a set of mountains. Both North Koreans and South Koreans, they're both the same people who originate from the mountains. And in North Korea, they're becoming more and more westernized, but they're still airtight. I mean, they're not as severe as it was maybe 30 years ago, but they're still pretty communist. And the South Koreans, if you live in North Korea, you would have to look over to South Korea from time to time when you got close enough, and they see all that technology, all that money. How can you look over and see all that money and technology and then want to stay in North Korea? And then I don't get people sneak in there sometimes. Some Westerners will sneak into North Korea and try to pass out Bibles. I don't get this. And then the politics of North Korea is interesting. What do they call it? Duce, or where I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, where the leader is basically it's f the rest of the world, fuck the rest of the world. They don't want anything to do with any other country. If they're in poverty or they're doing bad, that's fine. They don't want any help or anything to do with anybody. That's basically their philosophy. And that's the Jameel Rawls show on foreign language and foreign customs. I guess when we come back, I'm still learning Russian. I'm learning to write Russian. The alphabet is very easy to learn the alphabet, the Russian alphabet. It's not hard to learn the Russian alphabet. I caught on quick just by watching a few YouTube videos of a Russian woman teaching. But when we come back, I'll come back with foreign customs, foreign language, and I'll have some more customs from Russia, and then we'll go over a few sentences. I like those Russian dog experiments. Those dead Russian dog experiments. This stuff is interesting. They're saying this is back many years ago, and they're saying they had a dog who they decapitated the dog, and they were bringing the dog back to life. And then they would put 3 heads on one dog. They would somehow take the heads off the other dogs and sew it onto one dog. So there'd be one dog with 3 heads, and these experiments were so gruesome. Unusual experiments and surgeries include the transplantation of the head or half body, surgical combination of 2. And then the Russian brain, I used to sit online, how Vladimir Demenkov actually made a 2-headed dog, I used to sit on here and watch the Soviet brain surgeries and stuff. They had some marvelous scientists in Eastern Europe. They had some really good inventors. Yeah, that's customs and foreign language on the Jameel Rawls show.